This is Start, Grow, Manage, where we help managed service providers achieve the impact, freedom, and wealth you imagined back when you started your company. At Start, Grow, Manage, our tools, practices, and processes help you engage, energize, and execute on building a business that empowers an extraordinary life. Learn more about our programs and how they can fuel your fire at startgrowmanage.com/learn more. Let's go.
So, Joe, I was talking to somebody the other day about growing their business. And here's the problem that they have is that they are actually onboarding people around the country, and it is painful. And so he's talking to me about the fact that how do we onboard people? Like, we have to vertically niche. Like, we have to understand our niche. We have to understand the people that we're working with. I get that geography is not a niche. And then he's saying, but it's just too tiring to go around the country and do these installs. And so today we're going to talk to Steve Salmon. Will guide us through how to use Field Nation to do that. And we've had some amazing success stories with.
We have.
And in that, we're going to talk to him about the fear of working with someone like Field Nation, overcoming some of that fear. But I think what it comes back to for me, more than anything, Joe, more than anything, is it's a mindset issue.
100%. It's a fear of something new or something different or something that I don't control or something that I don't understand. It's this mindset that if that person's not on my payroll, I can't control them. And it's mostly driven by lack of process.
I'm going to push back and say there's process. You've got to have a process. But I see too many people, they even have a process and they're afraid to use someone like Field Nation. So I don't think it's process. I think it is mindset. Process you can fix. Process you can go create a process. Yeah. But I think it's a fear of growth. It's a fear of, you just said it, like, I lose control. And there's a fear of losing control. But you know what? If you're going to grow a business, you cannot be in control of everything that happens in that business. Like, I don't care what it is. You use Field Nation, use somebody else, whatever it is. Even if you hire somebody, you cannot be in control of everything they do and expect to scale the business. And I think that's the problem. I think there's an issue with just letting go of control and not controlling what we're doing, is what the business is doing.
I think you're spot on in terms of the mindset and all that stuff. And then the other piece, which is what we're always talking about, is if you don't have a niche, then every time you do it is different. So you're terrified because you never know what you're doing. You actually don't know what you're doing.
Why is it just that every conversation keeps coming back to having a niche? And it's true, though. If you're doing an onboarding for the 100th time at a grocery store, I'm working with somebody at grocery stores, and you know how to hook up their POS and how to hook up their inventory systems and how to make all that stuff work because you've done it 1,000 times. It's really easy for you to explain it to somebody else. But if you're so good at grocery stores and then you go off and work with dentists or body shops or, I don't know, libraries, it's going to be hard. Like, it is inventing the wheel and reinventing the wheel. So when you know what you're doing, it is much easier for you to create that standard operating procedure and to be able to define how they're going to do it because you know it. You're not reinventing. You're not doing it new for the first time.
And what that does is it gives you confidence, right? And then when you have that confidence and you have a process around it, it's easier to work on the mindset. But when your mindset is screwed up and you're free falling, you don't know what you're doing anyway. It's like terrifying.
But I'm still going to say, even if you have the process, even if you know what you're going to do, even if you've got it defined, it's still a leap into the unknown
100%.
to have somebody else do the work for you. And there's this amazing thing that happens. Like, people are so scared and then they do it and they come back to us and they're like, oh my God, that was great.
I haven't been doing that all along. Why didn't you tell me before?
All of a sudden they realize that they don't have to do it all themselves. So I think it was a great chat with Steve. I was very, very interested in the idea of starting an MSP in the 90s. And a lot of the conversations that I've been having, people are saying, oh, the MSP model is dying. And I think that what's dying is really the fact that you just can't do business tomorrow the way you did it yesterday. The world is changing and it's always changing. And I think understanding that customer pain and probably staying away from the shiny things that are out there and really focusing on solving that pain, I think that's always going to serve you well. So on that note, let's go have a chat with Steve, shall we?
Let's do it.
Steve, thanks for joining us and coming to talk with us. I'd love to just have you give a quick introduction of yourself and what you do, and then we'll just take it from there.
Okay. As you guys know, I'm Steve Salmon. I am the Executive Vice President of Enterprise Sales at Field Nation and our partnership and alliances strategy. I've been in the IT services and technology industry for about 30 years in numerous different roles. Most recently, before Field Nation, I spent 12 years at CompuCom, helping grow CompuCom from about 250 million in services to over $1 billion. And then we ultimately sold CompuCom to Office Depot back in 2017. And then before that, a number of different technology companies, but probably most notably that you guys are interested in is that I had my own MSP from 92 to 97 and successfully sold that company in 97 to a public company and really had a great time doing it. It was one of those things where it was some of the best times and some of the worst times during that period. But I'm sure we'll talk more about that.
92 to 97, that was early years of the MSP wave there.
It was. And what was interesting about that particular time in kind of business history is it was the last true recession in the United States. 2008, 2001 were very kind of focused recessions in very specific parts of the market. But that was a broad recession in the early 90s there. And so we had to manage that business through the 90s and that period of time, which was interesting.
So what was key to you growing? So I take it you took this thing from nothing to a sale, right?
Yeah.
And what was key for you in terms of growing the MSP in the 90s? That's an interesting situation.
It was kind of these things I just fell into. I worked with a couple of guys. We were frustrated with the company we worked with. We weren't making enough money and we were young and dumb, only a few years out of college.
That helps when you're moving into an entrepreneurial venture.
I thought I knew a lot more than I really did. That's really probably the more proper way of saying it. But we decided to go do this thing. And I had two partners, and one of them, he quit first. I said, let's just go do this thing. I said, I don't know if I'm quite ready yet. So he quit, and we got into this thing, and it took off. It was in the age when Novell was really the thing that everyone was talking about in local area networks. And there just weren't enough people doing that. The demand was way higher than the supply. So it really was a great time to get into that.
That's interesting. We've been doing some research and some interviews with MSPs lately, just looking at what are some of the trends in the market. And one of the consistent themes that I think comes out of my conversations with MSPs is just this idea of knowing what that next thing is and developing some capabilities around it. At that time, it was putting in your network. And now two things seem to be coming up. One of them is cybersecurity. The other one is customization and being able to give customers what they want. It's almost like the MSP world has gone through a period of a standardization to one of customization and delivering customers what they want. And it seems like there's like this constant theme, right? If you look at it, understanding what that next thing is and developing the capabilities to be able to ride that wave.
Yep. It's so hard to pick it. If you think about it, just a couple of years ago, everyone was talking about the Internet of Things, IoT. And there were a lot of folks that invested in IoT. And it took a long time for that really to generate returns. A lot of people made investments that they never saw the returns on in terms of training their employees on different skills. And just now we're really starting to see that with electronic store shelf technology that's just really taken off.
Yeah. One of our clients is really getting into the electronic store shelf technology, and you're starting to see IoT pop up all over the place, but it's because we're the early adapters, MSPs, we're always like training on stuff that's like a year out or a year and a half out or 2 years out. And so we get sucked in by the technology and want to know more about that. And what I'm interested in is back in 92, when you were making this jump, where did you narrow down? What did you focus on? Was it Novell that you focused on? What's the thing that you narrowed down on that had you, because you went turbo there for a little while?
Yeah, it was interesting. So for us, there were a lot of people trying to do Novell. And I had personally had some experience with Unix systems. And so what we saw pretty quickly was there were a lot of companies were struggling with their accounting systems, or back in those days, it wasn't ERP, it was MRP on some kind of Unix-based host. And then they were put in these local area networks and they couldn't connect the two. They had different communication protocols, and one was IPX with Novell, and then of course early TCP/IP. And at that time, TCP/IP, there was not a lot working there, and so you really had to have some skills to connect the two. And so we saw that as an opportunity. And so that was the thing that we really specialized on, is finding folks that had accounting systems on Unix-based hosts. And so it just really worked out well for us. We quickly caught the eye of Novell and IBM, and even some with their distributed systems was really starting to take off at that point. And we caught their eye. And so next thing you know, all of these companies are interested in us because we had TCP/IP expertise and Novell IPX expertise with a really heavy skill sets in Novell. And then back then, and I think it was right around 97, Novell purchased Unix Systems Labs from AT&T, which you can't make this up, right? I just got lucky. And it's because we had this really strong relationship with Novell as a partner and an MSP with Novell, they invited us to be part of the advisory committee for USL, what USL became when it became part of Novell. And so a little bit of that was luck, but I think the point you're making is we had this focus. We picked that as our niche, as opposed just to join local area networking as a general approach. We had a niche that really worked well for us.
And what I think is important about it is, and what's different between that niche and the Internet of Things, is that what you identified was a pain. And then you were solving the pain. So Internet of Things was a McKinsey thing. And it wasn't real. McKinsey came up with this idea, Internet of Things. Like, they're the ones who published the first paper. They went around Internet of Things, Internet of Things. And if you really sat back and looked at it, you're like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Like, it wasn't really well defined. Yeah, there are going to be a bunch of things on the network, but where's the opportunity here? There wasn't a lot of pain in it, except in very specific situations like manufacturing and mining, where I was working at the time. The idea of IoT would solve problems for us, but you still had to come in and solve the problem for the client. Like, it wasn't like just, hey, we're gonna have things attached to the network isn't particularly exciting. So I think it's interesting you identified that problem in the 90s and solved it. So I think when you look at it today, you have to identify what are the problems that your clients have, that your target customer has. What are the problems that the target customer has? And then come up with solutions to that pain. And I think that seems to be the consistent story of growth.
Yeah, I would agree. I think when you get sucked into the hype, the IoT hype that started back 5-6 years ago, and it's tough when you're in that spot and you're having to pick those areas. Where am I going to invest? But you're not going to get every one of them all the time. And so you got to look for where the customer problem is and not just what the product side is. It's not about the supply. It's more about that demand side. I think that's the point you're making. And I think that's a really good one.
Yeah. You just can't push things on people. There has to be a problem. There has to be something that you're solving.
But so that kind of reminds me, and just as I go through and look at the conversations, I think that AI is that new hype that everybody's on now.
Yeah.
Oh, how do I push AI? How do I use AI? But it's not solving a problem yet for the client, or they're not looking at it through the lens of solving the customer problem. See, AI could be great if it solves your customer's problem. But if it doesn't, you shouldn't even be talking to your client about it. If your client comes and you know it's not going to solve their problem, you need to be able to tell them, look, this is not going to work, or it's not going to do the thing that you think it's going to do, or let's look at it. But I think there's a real danger of getting sucked into that hype the same way that we got sucked into the IoT hype. And you do all this training and you train your staff on it and you make all this noise around it, but you get stuck in being able to generate more revenue, which is why you're in business.
Oh, that's what we're doing. Oh my gosh.
So that's the thing, right? We get so enamored with the tech that we forget to make money. And I've been there as an MSP where I get enamored with some new thing that comes out. I remember when smart switches came out and I could see the traffic on the switch and we fell in love with it. And we took our focus off of sales for a little bit. I was like, oh crap.
Who wants to buy these at that point? Yeah. I think it's not just being enamored by the technology. That's a huge part of it, but also it's that you feel like you've got to be first. It's like a race. You've got to get there. And so there's this innate human thing that happens to us, right? Where you want to win, you want to be first, you want to get there. And being first isn't always best. It's going to be here for a while. You might make a little bit more money on the front end in terms of the hourly rate you can charge for something before that starts to commoditize or normalize anyway. And that was the thing that happened to us. We did a couple of things like that. When we had our business, we did that with Notes. So Notes came out. Remember Lotus Notes?
Oh, yeah.
Lotus Notes came out, and
I do remember Lotus Notes.
It was going to be the next biggest thing, and we jumped into that. And we made some investment in that, and we made some money on it, but it definitely didn't go the way we'd hoped it would go with the investment we made.
And that's the thing, right? So if you're an MSP now, what's the advice that you would give MSPs today to avoid that trap? What's the kind of thinking that you need to be doing? Because you've been there. You've been there. You saw what happened to you. So what is the kind of thinking when you get all, get all excited about it? What's the thinking that you need to be doing around that? How do you stay out of the trap?
I think it's what Jeff said a few minutes ago. You really have to focus on the customer problem. You can't lose sight of the customer problem. We start to get focused on the solution, which is the technology we're talking about. And while that's exciting and it's fun, you can't lose sight of the customer problem. And you've just got to stay vigilant with that. At Field Nation, we have the same thing where we think we've got this great new idea for the platform, and then we go test it with customers and nobody wants to use it.
We got like this whole new AI dispatching job describer that you put in, and it's all wrong, but it really looks great. For anybody who's reading this, I've just made that up. I mean, I just made that up. This isn't a dig at Field Nation. What got you excited about Field Nation when you started with Field Nation?
It's interesting. So when I was at CompuCom, my last role there, I ran a special project to create a wholesale services division. We had this big services team, and field services is about density. If you're going to have employees versus using third parties. And so we were helping companies build density for ourselves. And so we had this wholesale services kind of approach. And I met the CEO and founder of Field Nation at that point, and was just really just enamored with what they were doing. Just thought, this is the coolest thing. This is the future. Never had any idea I'd ever be working with Field Nation and working for Knoll. But we kept in touch after we sold the company to Office Depot. I left CompuCom and Knoll, and I kept in touch. And I just really loved where they were going. They got some equity investment, which really gave them a shot in the arm. And so when I first joined the company, I joined as a consultant for 90 days to the leadership team, helping them think about how to go after enterprise accounts. They'd had a bunch of kind of hits and misses with enterprise accounts over the years. At one point, Knoll told his sales team, no more enterprise accounts, because they were spending so much sales resource on these deals that would take a year to close or not even close. So he said, we can't spend any more time on enterprise accounts. And I came in and did a consulting engagement, and they liked what I did and I liked them, and they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And so I'm super excited. The amount of people that we're able to bring work to, that's the really exciting thing. The amount of people that get work from Field Nation and are able to provide for their families is truly amazing. And we don't talk about that a lot. We don't talk about the provider side and the worker side of the business a lot, but that's really the heart and soul of the business. All those providers.
No, that is very cool. One of the things I love about it is we're always talking about creating a niche. And one of the niches that we've found to be the least valuable is geography. Being tied to a geography typically these days just isn't an advantage. Like, it used to be an advantage. You could go over to somebody's office quickly, but it just isn't an advantage anymore, except that sometimes you do need to go to their office. Like, sometimes you do actually need to go there. And it's a painful thing that if, somebody in Las Vegas has a problem and I'm living in New York and they may be a great client and I need to see them tomorrow, like, to get on a plane and fly over there to plug in a cable is just too painful. So what I think is very cool about Field Nation is that it gives the MSPs the ability to hone their capabilities around one avatar, one way of doing business, and not be tied to a geography.
Yeah. And that's magical. The other thing is that you can have as big or as small field presence as you want on any given day, right? You need 20 technicians to do something. You can, because you got this giant project and you're a 4-man shop, you can get it done. You need one to go do something in Alaska, you can get that done too. So that's the cool thing about it that I think it's really awesome. I can't tell you how many times I'm talking to an MSP that's under $1 million. And they tell me, oh, I'm having this problem and we have this install and I just don't have enough manpower to do it. And I go, well, why don't you use Field Nation? They go, what's that? And this breaks my heart.
It breaks my heart. How do they not know?
So basically, Steve, what we're saying is you got to do more marketing.
Apparently.
Because the big companies know they can leverage Field Nation. Anybody that's over 5 million, I say Field Nation, they know exactly what I'm talking about. But the little guys don't know.
Right.
And so what happens is they don't take advantage of the opportunity. Even if you're geographically tied, you can build an amazing work pool in your geographies, wherever you like. Let's say you have clients in Florida and New York and California. You can build a great work pool in those places and take advantage of that. And if you don't know, you're literally flying around to do the work. And that takes you away from sales. It takes you away from everything else.
But I do want to ask you a question, Steve. So with these small clients, and we work with a lot of smaller MSPs, there is actually a lot of fear around using Field Nation, especially like the first time. And what we hear over and over again is they're just not going to do it as well as I do it. Or they're not going to do it the way I do it, or I don't know how to control that. And I'm wondering how you address that concern with your new customers.
I would tell you that issue exists with companies of all size, whether it's a large enterprise, a major global OEM, or it's a small kind of 1 or 2 person shop. That same kind of trust concern factor exists with everybody the first time. And what I'd say is that the tool's got a number of features built into it to help manage that and make sure that you can effectively communicate with the worker what it is you want to get done. So that it really gets down to having 2 things: selecting the right worker and then communicating, clear communication on the expectations of what you want to have done when that person's at the customer site. Really, those are the 2 things, and that's really it. And so what we've seen is people have bad experiences on Field Nation, and what happens is if you just drop a work order onto the platform and just let anybody take it, you may or may not get somebody that has the right skills and tools to do that job. So there's a little bit of vetting that goes into that. There's tools in the platform on how to do that, how to vet, how to determine if that worker has the right background and skills. And of course, a lot of the workers have thousands and thousands of jobs. So it's really easy to see where else can you get 1,000 referrals on a potential worker. It's hard, right? You have to take somebody's word for it. Like, have you done this for? Yeah, I've done it now. And on Field Nation, you can look and see how many jobs they've done. You can see what other people have said about them. And that's a really useful tool. But most importantly, it gets down to communication. We even see some seasoned customers get sloppy from time to time with the work instructions. And if you don't tell somebody what you want them to do and you expect them to get it done, that's a big stretch.
Go there and do stuff. And then you're like, but they didn't do it the right way. It does help to tell people what stuff you want to have done.
Yeah. I always tell everybody they got to be IKEA simple. The instructions have to be IKEA simple.
It's interesting. The workers are accessing most of the work via their mobile device. A job comes up in their area that they're qualified for and available. It pops up on their device and says, here's the thing. They look at that job and they quickly decide, is this a good rate? Can I do the work? And if they do, then they request the work. And so that simplicity that you mentioned, Joe, is really important. If you write a huge novel in that thing, you're not going to get the good work. I don't want to do that. If the work instructions are poorly written, the experienced workers won't take it because they know that's going to be a problem. They're going to get on site and it's going to be something else than what was described. So I think the work instructions and simplicity are the key. And we have tremendous success with that. And if going back 10 years ago, a lot of the workers on our platform, there weren't as many seasoned professionals. We recently did a survey and we were amazed that 75% of the workers have some form of postgraduate kind of training or technical training. It's quite amazing. There's true professionals out there on the platform.
I just want to go back to something you said that was really important, Steve, which is just the idea of these people that are qualified, but the other one is thousands of reviews. Where else are you going to find somebody that you can actually know with such specificity what their capabilities are? So you can actually see people who've done the work that you've done and gotten good reviews from other people on that work. If you put a job offer in LinkedIn or something, you're not going to get nearly the depth of review or insight that you get from your platform.
That's right. And let's just say that you do call someone's references. You're going to call 2 of them or 3 of them. Here you get thousands. And it gets really specific, right? You can see, oh, this worker's got 500 reviews for cabling work, 250 reviews for desktop, laptop work, 100 reviews for networking work, 300 reviews for point of sale, whatever the different technology is, you can see. And so if you have a job, let's say, for example, let's go out and drop a cable and install a point of sale device, or drop a cable and install a desktop. You can see people that have done that level of specificity and what people have said about their work and how they've been rated. I think that should put people to a little bit more ease, that at least they know that they're dealing with somebody who's got some experience, thousands of jobs.
I think that the MSPs just have to realize that they're not that special. Like when it comes to a cabling job, yes, you have to have clear guidelines. But I was talking to somebody the other day. Wow, but we just have this special way of doing things, and it has to be. It's probably not that special. The work that we're talking about here is work that you can describe what has to happen. You can describe what has to be done. And I think to a certain extent, people just have to get over it. They just have to try it. You know what I mean? Nothing is perfect, but this is a good way to add resources and add customer value and do it. And part of that resistance is just mindset.
If you look at that resistance, Jeff, it's across the board. It's with changing the way they market. It's with picking a niche. It's all over the place, right? No, that's not how we do things. But here's the thing, guys. How you do things is why you're not making money. So if you want to make money, you have to really start to look at whether the things that you're doing are going to produce the outcomes that you want. And if they're not going to produce the outcomes that you want, because the MSPs that are successful, that are on the platform, that are on Field Nation, and that are niche down, and that have done all these things that we're talking about all the time. And I'm talking about all of it now, everything that we talk about, right? Every different podcast, we talk about a different thing that you should be doing. But if you're doing those things, what you'll notice is that you start to make more money. And at the end of the day is, do you want to have a great life? Because it's about how you're going to live your life and being able to go kite surfing. Steve?
Exactly. So when I sold my company, it was about 150 employees. And that's a lot. That's a 7x24 job when you got 150 employees. I was getting the calls at Saturday night, midnight. Hey, I'm at the emergency room. My insurance card's not working. Call the number on the back of the card. I can't help you. What can I do? It was a 7x24 job. And I think one of the opportunities is when you can access variable on-demand labor like this, when they're not working, you're not having to provide for the care and feeding of them, and on a number of different levels. And so they do a number of different jobs. They work for a lot of different companies. And the value in that is it gives you that opportunity to enjoy your life. I think had there been a Field Nation option when I had my company, it would have been amazing. I would have definitely taken advantage of it. We have so many stories at Field Nation where we've got these small MSPs that start off, sometimes individual providers on our platform. They start off and they get so successful, they have so much demand for their work on the platform that they'll bring in another person. And then they'll bring in another person. And then they actually create these little services companies on our platforms. About 70% of the workers on our platform are truly independent contractors, and about 30% are part of these small little services companies. Some banded together as part of this, we need to work together. But some of them started their MSP and they were small. And next thing they're $5 million, $10 million, $15 million businesses because they're not tied to the single geography like you talked about. They can broaden into other areas. They can do one thing, and when they have a good customer that really likes them and they build that customer relationship, and the customer says, hey, you've been doing all desktop, laptop work. Can you go do some networking work for us? They can now do that work because they have access to those skills that they wouldn't have if they had to go out and hire. Like to go out and hire that person to go do the first job is always expensive because you don't have enough work.
Yeah. You go get that first person, they're sitting around. And
Yeah,
usually
exactly.
those two skill sets, like cabling and desktop stuff, those are real. It's hard to find somebody that's got both of those. They're either really good at cabling or really good at desktop stuff, but in the middle, not a whole bunch. So that's why it's hard, because then if you're hiring and you're hiring for that cabling and you don't have enough work, you're now stuck needing somebody that you can't really use for a lot of things. So get that.
When we went through the same thing with my company, growth is messy. If it was a straight line, it would be beautiful, but it's not. It's a jagged line. And with a lot of hiring surges, unfortunately, we also had layoffs at times because we hired people and then we couldn't. We tried to get into a new area, hired one or two people, didn't have the work, and then ended up having to reduce the headcount because we just didn't have the work in that area. And I think this allows you to get into an area without having to make that upfront cash flow commitment.
I'm going to ask you that same question that I asked you before again. So what's the advice that you give these guys that are sub-million? You were there. What do you have to say to those guys that are there now?
I would say that we talked about the focus. And I think around the focus, you need to have some core expertise, whether that's yourself as the founder and the leader or someone else in the business. If you can afford that cash flow, you really need that core expertise. Beyond that core expertise, when it comes down to going out and executing a lot of the work, I think that's where using variable labor is the advice that I would give. That's the advice that my partners and I used to have arguments about how much variable labor we should have. And this is way before Field Nation, right? This is just back in the days. And back then our choice was W-2 staff augmentation or hiring W-2. And we would argue, should it be 20% variable and 80% full-time? And we would have these arguments. And that give us some level of agility. We could say we don't need that person anymore because they were from a staffing kind of company. Today, you have a lot more choices as an MSP. It's more than just traditional staff augmentation. You have this gig economy and the labor, this variable workforce. And I think I would maximize that as much as possible. You definitely want to stay out of trouble with labor compliance issues, and you don't want to use these kind of workers long-term for jobs that should be intended for W-2 style workers. But I think for short-term work, project assignments, Anything less than, let's say, 20 hours a week, I think the variable labor force is really, a great way to do it and really keep your cash flow in your control, because now you don't have a committed cash flow out every month. I think we almost went out of business 3 times. And it was really because we were hiring and our payroll demand got so high at times. I was sitting on my own paycheck in my drawer for weeks at a time just because I wanted to make sure everyone else's paychecks didn't bounce. And that was a large in part due to our growing payroll demand.
And I agree, you can't rely on variable labor forever, but there is this huge working capital situation that happens when you start adding people. We talk a lot about variable cost versus fixed cost, and as you add fixed cost, you really lose flexibility and you have that problem. You really want to be careful about adding that fixed cost of the next unit of fixed labor. And as you're growing, I think, did you ever come up with what the right ratio was in terms of variable to fixed, or is it, you think it depends, or what kind of number did you guys come up with?
It always bounced somewhere between 80-20 and 70-30. It started off at 90-10 and we realized that wasn't enough. They didn't give us enough flexibility. And then because we ran the business in a recession, something interesting happened to us. When we were doing this project work, installing these Novell networks and these TCP/IP networks, that was on the front end of the recession, and project work was going crazy. And then during the recession, project work slowed down, like discretionary spending slowed down, but maintenance work didn't slow down. So we shifted our focus to more maintenance-oriented work because that has to happen. Things break, they got to get fixed. And so during the recession, we did quite a bit more maintenance work. And what we found was that the ratios weren't the same. So for more project work, a higher density of variable labor was more feasible. And then for the maintenance work, it was more predictable, right? So we knew what our install base was and what we were on the hook to fix, what kind of SLAs we had to fix those. And so we went for a little bit less variable work.
Right. So if you're an MSP and you're sub-million, here's what that translates to. As you're doing your initial push and you're doing that, you're trying to onboard a lot of people and you're doing that customer growth and you're really focusing and you're running, you want more variable because you want to be able to onboard people quickly and be able to have that onboarding process so clean, so neat, so IKEA style that you can just send out a packet. Everything is in the box. All the instructions are in the box. All the instructions are in the app, so that people could just boom. And then as you start to get bigger, you focus on those SBRs and you focus on just that maintenance of things as you start to think about what are my next strategic outcomes. Now you got some money to think about strategy because that impacts your cash flow in a big way because you get to keep a lot of the cash that you would have spent on hiring all these people to be able to onboard. And so I really like what you said, Steve, about that, because that's really how it all comes together, right? It's when you're smaller, you need to hunker down and just onboard and have your core team be really great at customer service and be so focused, so narrow, understand, have that expertise so that you really can own what you're doing for those clients. It's really cool. Thank you for that, because that's a really good set.
Good. For anybody who is interested in Field Nation, we do have a lot of our clients use Field Nation as a way to grow. We've certainly had great experience with you guys, and we know a lot of our clients have as well. So we actually have a training available to anybody who wants to get started with the platform, and it's really geared towards smaller MSPs. Anybody can use it, right? But the idea was that the thing that we saw that was missing was for our clients, how do smaller MSPs get started? How do they get dispatching right? And so we've got this really cool training, and we will include that in the show notes. And I think that's a great way to get started with Field Nation. Just understand how the platform works, understand the opportunities to find people and work with them, people who are reviewed, people who have done work before, and we actually show you how to do that. So I think that's another way to overcome the fear of using a program like this. And I think the work that you guys are doing is really valuable. I think it's helping a lot of MSPs grow. And I guess you guys are seeing the growth as a result, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a lot of fun. We're having a ton of fun. I think that's the best part about it. Like I said, the really rewarding part is the labor side of it, to see the people that are getting the work. Yeah. But also to see these small companies thrive. We've seen a lot of these small companies come in and really thrive. We've got some great success stories. Like I said earlier, these guys have come in as a single provider on our platform.
Yeah.
And they grow that into their own MSP from there.
I think that's really cool, right? Where you're actually working with both sides and just generating opportunities. We were just talking about Adam Smith and the wealth of nations, and that's the entire idea, Joe, as I was talking about. It's like people focusing on the thing that they're good at, right? And through that, you're able to create a lot of value and create a lot of opportunity. And you guys are facilitating that concept. Anyway, we love it. Any thoughts, Steve? Anything that you guys are promoting that people should come check out from you guys? We have the training, but anything else that you want to be sure that people know about?
Yeah, I'd say for a lot of your MSPs that are just really getting going, it works for any size company. While I focus on the enterprise businesses, it's from everything from the smallest of the MSPs to these big companies are on the platform. We have different use cases for all of those different size companies. You can sign up, you can use the free version basically. And so you can sign up and you can check it out. And there's a ton of training out there on how to use it. And then you guys are obviously a resource on how to teach them how to use it. So I think, like you said earlier, you just got to get on there and try it. But don't forget to be specific about the work instruction.
And communicate.
Yeah.
I know we're wrapping up, but I think it's universally an issue that we see is this idea of communication. Communicate with your customers, communicate with your people. And if you're hiring somebody from Field Nation, communicate with them. Communication really solves a lot of problems. I think that's an important thing for people to get. Thank you for taking a few minutes to chat with us. Your story is great. And I think that it's inspiring the work that you're doing. So thank you very much. And I guess that's it. Joe, you want to take us out?
I'll take us out. For all of you out there, remember that you are loved. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for joining us, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one right now and tap into our insights and instincts to help drive your business vision and success. Remember, you didn't start your business to feel frustration. You started it for freedom. We can help you discover the impact, freedom, and wealth you always imagined. Learn more at startgrowmanage.com/learn more.